Welcome back to Ladies of Another View, and I want to welcome back to our show Brandon Brice, and he is with Project 21. It's a conservative Black movement within the National Center for what is it? nationalcenter.org is their website. Mm-hmm. So we were talking about school choice, and we had a very lively conversation during the break. And we are concerned, why is this a partisan issue? Why isn't, if the students come first, shouldn't they get to choose which school they go to? And it seems like the poor are saying, yeah, we're for school choice. Republicans are saying we're for school choice. So what's going on that the Democrats keep fighting against this?
And the teachers union.
And the teachers union.
The whole conversation is about money. I mean, let's just call it what it is. When you move the money with the parent or the student, it now doesn't go back into the coffer. And I think the challenge is that parents are starting to wake up to say, you could have the most, the most challenging argument. It doesn't stop to think that a kid is either learning or they're not. And we talked about this earlier and saying, when you think about school choice, this should be one of the issues like business where it should be a nonpartisan issue, because the reality is a kid is either learning or they're not. And so the fact that, just think about this for a minute, you have people in Washington, in state capitals, that are advocating to keep young people in failing school districts that they know are failing. That is criminal, and that is creating a permanent underclass when you think about it. And forget weapons of mass destruction and all of this global talks. The biggest weapon of mass destruction is the failing school system in the United States. That's our biggest issue. We don't wrap our hands around that. This will be one of the most pertinent issues to us remaining the superpower that we are.
And something else that came up on the break, I just came back from a high school graduation for a family member, and we got on the discussion of when should work become something that a child is able to do legally. Because in our country, in our state even, it used to be if you went to California, wherever, and you said you're from North Dakota, you probably didn't even have to finish your interview. You were hired because they knew the work ethic. And most of the kids started young age, like paper routes or delivering things to elderly. Or
they worked on the farm.
Right, and they worked on the farm. So what are we seeing in our nation when you pair it with education, where they're not learning what they need to learn in the classroom, and they're not able to get some kind of paying job to learn job skills? How does that all work in the final product for our kids?
So you're asking two questions. I'll start with the first one. A lot of it went back from us leaving the agricultural agrarian society and moving into more of the industrial revolution. So when we left the farm, and let's be honest, anybody who, at least if in the African American community, any grandparent, great grandparent, the minimum they had was 4 or 5 kids. I've heard where they've had 10 kids, 12 kids. The reason is because when you're on a farm, you need people to work the farm. And so, part of that was why you had such large families back in the beginning of the 20th century. But now segue into this work thing. I come from Michigan, where I come from and where the host comes from, has one of the largest Islamic populations outside of the Middle East. And I remember as a young person going into a little bodega store, corner store, and I would see young people as early as 7 and 8 years old helping out. Now, they weren't, running the finances, but they were shelving the stock. They were working. And today, those young people who are working now own very successful businesses because it was instilled to them. And this is something that we're seeing a lot of when you think of immigrants that come to the United States. I mean, this is what we've even seen at the turn of the century in these United States. Go back and look at the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts. These guys were working as in their teenage years. Vanderbilt at 14 ran a steamboat company. And so my point is, we got to get out of this this negative connotation of the concept of work. And let's be clear, I'm not saying exploitation. That is not what we're saying. We're talking about work, the understanding of getting up on time, the understanding on following through with your work, the understanding on doing a good job. These are things that we think people have. And when you start to look at the turnover rate, when you start to look at, the reality is the jobs are here. Is the expertise here? That's the question. But the jobs are
Okay.
here.
Well, Brandon, I love what you were saying right there, and I really agree with that as well. And then I saw though that you have an interesting take on how reparations is only going to make this work. Can you go into worse? Can you go into that a little bit?
So let me be very clear. I am not a fan of this whole. I believe history has the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I think we need to face it. We need to embrace it. But I think where history. So I'm not a fan of the cancel culture. I think
Right.
where we become successful is by learning it, embracing it, accepting it, and then moving on, never to repeat it again. And so I think history is a very important message. I say that because I do think there needs to be a form of reparations that we see in our country. Now, what does that look like? That's a different conversation. I think to me, we saw a form of this process called the stimulus checks. Let's go back 3 or 4 years ago. We got people who gave them money without financial literacy, without understanding what and how to use that money. You know what happened? It ended up right back in the government's hands. And so I think for us moving forward, we've got to look at if we're going to put together a comprehensive reparations plan that doesn't bankrupt the nation, but also actually moves people forward and is not just a soundbite for some, liberal Democrat, then I think we need to start to look at what does a comprehensive reparations plan look like? Does that mean quality access in schools where we're uh, supporting more funding for college and for trade opportunities for people of color? Does that mean that we need to start looking at ways that we can reinvest in small businesses, minority business? And here's the kicker: when you think of minority women-owned businesses, if you look at minority business entities alone, specifically for people of color, these are the things that truly move the country forward. Why? Because people typically tend to hire people that look like them or that come from their neighborhoods or that they know. So I think, this is a conversation where we're going to do it. We need to do it right. And we need to do it in a way where it is uh, empowering and not combative or not just some political promise that goes out the door. And again, if you look at the stimulus plan, we've already seen the remnants of what would happen at the smaller level. And this is not popular. Maybe we need to have a conversation on, the trade systems and how do we get more people of color involved in the trades? How do we get more women involved in the science and the engineering? But here's the catch: if the biggest way to solve a lot of the economic issues in the minority communities is to simply beef up the math. People say, well, math is not as important as helping someone get tech jobs. You cannot do the tech jobs without understanding basic mathematics. And so and uh, if we solve the math and science issue in our communities, we will see a huge change in the types of jobs that people of color can be competitive for 5, 10, and 20 years out.
So we need to take a break. And I'm not sure, we have a little technicality going on here. I'm not sure if our next guest is going to be able to join us. If not, can you stay with us, Brandon?
Absolutely.
Because we have more we would like to talk about, as is usually the case. We're going to take a break and stay with us, and you'll find out who's going to be on next.
Yeah.